Hey, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today and welcome to our user group and product showcase for Gimmal Discover. We're thrilled to have you all here, whether you're a first-time attendee or a long-term customer. Thank you so much for being part of our community. Okay, so let me introduce our team for today. I am Marcia Shields. I'm from our customer success team. And joining me also will be Jeff Tuish, who's one of our sales engineers, and also Rick Wilson, who's our senior product manager for Gimmal Discover. Okay, so we have you for the next hour, and we have a full agenda with some good presentations from both Jeff and Rick. The format of this user group is going to be more of a product showcase because we really wanted to highlight and demonstrate a few key use cases for Gimmal Discover. We're going to break these out into 4 key sessions, including sensitive data discovery, redundant, outdated, and trivial data, legal hold notifications, and then we're also going to give you an exclusive preview to what's coming to Gimmal Discover soon, which will be an integration between Gimmal Discover and Microsoft Purview labels. We'll round things out with letting you know where Gimmal's going to be in some upcoming events, and then we'll let you go for the afternoon. So just a few housekeeping items. Questions are certainly welcomed and encouraged. We're going to be using the Q&A area on your Zoom bar. So as the presentations proceed, feel free to post questions in that Q&A area. I'll be monitoring that, and then we will take questions after each session. All right, so before we get started, I wanted to give you a little overview of Gimmal Discover. And the reason for that is because we've opened this user group, so to speak, up to customers that don't have the product yet today. So for those that are here for educational purposes, welcome and thanks for joining us. Overall, Gimmal Discover is our data governance platform that's really meant to simplify managing your electronic data across your entire enterprise. Quite frankly, Discover can do a lot of different things for a lot of different teams in your organization. Examples of these are on the right-hand side, which cover everything from security use cases, legal, as well as IT and records. As you can also see, Discover can connect to a lot of different data sources. So from everything from your Microsoft environment, that might be your email, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, all the way to Google Workspace, as well as your Windows file shares, and also your remote endpoints, which can include desktops and laptops. This gives you the ability to manage and enforce policies from one central location to all these different areas for any different use case. Today in our key sessions, we're going to demonstrate use cases that fall under the security, legal, and IT and records area. So with that said, let's get things started. And first up is going to be Jeff Tuish, and he's going to cover the first key session on sensitive data discovery. Jeff?
Thanks, Marcia. Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about sensitive data first. So, Marcia, if you please go to the next slide. Okay, so what is sensitive data? What people typically think of are the 2 listed here, the credit card numbers and social security numbers. But there's a lot of sensitive data out there. If you think about it, there's many different ways that can uniquely identify an individual. You could have Medicare IDs, you could have passport numbers, things down to your VIN, your vehicle identification number, your postal code, which now goes right to your house. So there's a lot of direct ways of identifying a person. There's also indirect ways, things that identify a group of people, such as blood type, gender, ethnicity, religion. But typically what we see are the ones that are personal identifiable, such as credit cards and socials. Also included on that is obviously login credentials, anything to do with legal contracts, invoices. Once again, imagine the amount of data. You see it every day coming through to you actually in the US mail. Just the information that's on there, your address, your phone number, all of that is personal identifiable information. So there's a lot of that data out there. And if you feel you have that data in your environment and you're not quite sure where, I will have to tell you, you're not alone. So there's a lot of companies that are going through and trying to identify their sensitive data because of the concerns of data leakage or bad actors, or just maybe a stolen laptop, whatever it might be, and how sensitive data could escape your environment and affect the company adversely. Next slide, please, Marcia. Okay, so here's some more types of sensitive data. Some of these things you might not have even considered. I'll let you read through those. I'm not going to read those to you, but there's a lot of different ways that you have out there. I know I have taken steps to make sure that my data is not stored in companies that send me catalogs and what have you. I've asked them to remove my name from there, just because when they get hacked, that's just one less person that they can possibly do something to. So I take those steps personally, and it's obviously a great idea to do that at the company level as well. Next slide, please, Marcia. Okay, so what are some of the challenges and risks? Well, you're going to see those, especially the challenges. It's the amount of data. There is a lot of data sitting out there, and you're going to see some stats coming up shortly in some future slides from our ROT analysis. But there's so much data, and it's growing. There is no better time to get your hands around this than now, because in a year, the problem is just going to be worse. So quite honestly, doing nothing right now is going to make it exponentially harder to do it in the future. So whether you use our Gimmal Discover product or any other product, I just encourage you to definitely take some steps to realize that you have some issues. And look at those locations. I mean, these are just things that Gimmal Discover can manage. File shares in OneDrive, SharePoint, email, endpoints. Let's be honest, we're all hoarders in some way or another. We might have our data organized, like in my email, no mocking, but I probably have, I'm guessing 1,000 personal folders. I have my data very well structured so I can find it. But at the same time, do I have email that could be that I shouldn't have as far as age? Maybe. And I'm sure everybody has that same thing as well. So that unstructured data growth is just getting worse and worse every year. And then not knowing what you have, that non-classification. One of the things that Gimmal Discover can do, and I'll be talking about that during the ROD as well, is to classify data, to actually go out and be able to look at the data, to understand what's in it, either metadata or content, and then make a decision on what label possibly I should apply to that data. That is something a lot of companies are considering, because that does the heavy lifting in advance of you knowing. So let's say that you have terabytes of data sitting out there, and now it's time for e-discovery. The less data that you have to discover, the faster it's going to be, obviously. And if we have some labels already assigned, then being able to find that data. So if you have your sensitive data assigned with a label, we've already done that work on identifying it, and it's much easier to find during any litigation times. Inside threats, like bad actors again, or even data leakage that wasn't meant in any malicious way, but it still occurred. And then regulatory fines. Nobody wants to be fined, especially being in the news. They say no bad press is good press, but I don't know if that's the case with things like regulatory fines. And there's your risk of financial, legal, reputational damage, which might be the biggest of these. I mean, I do know that sometimes the amount of the regulatory fines might appear like a rounding error to some companies and what their revenue is, but at the same time, it's just a good decision to make sure that you're protecting that sensitive data as much as possible. Next slide, please, Marcia. So how do we find sensitive data? Well, that's a darn good question. So how would you do that? Well, the most common way for things like your credit cards and social security numbers, those of you who have ventured into the dark yet powerful world of regular expression, also called regex, That's how you find data that's pattern-based. It allows you to set up patterns, and you can have smart patterns on that as well in identifying the proper data. So for instance, social security numbers, you can look for more than a 3-2-4 pattern. You can also put proximity around that for particular keywords. You could also have the character leading and following to identify if it's another number or a hash or a hyphen, then that would disqualify because it's part of a larger pattern. So there's ways of identifying that, but obviously you can also use keywords and phrases and any search expressions that you want to use. Finding that and understanding what you have is a very important step in identifying that sensitive data. So you need to have some solution that, once again, can go down into the content, because don't bank on the, for instance, on a file share, bank on the folder structure to tell you what only that data is within that folder. I doubt if that's the case. So make sure that you're looking at the content as well. And then once again, you'll see the risk of having that unstructured PII, and that is growing every day. We hear of things in the news constantly. I've heard of many different people having ransomwares and things like that to their data, and or once again being hacked into. So securing that sensitive data is really mandatory at this point, and I encourage you to do that sooner than later. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about how we can help you with that. So we have a free offering. Yes, I did say free offering called the Sensitive Data Assessment. This is for, as that text says under the title, this is for window file shares only. And what we do is we have a workflow and policy that we can set up in your environment. So the way Discover is deployed, and then we'll get into the architecture a little bit here, is you would simply spin up a VM in your environment. We'd install the Discover components on that together. And then one of the things that's installed is an agent to go out and connect to your file share. And it's going to look for credit cards. It's going to look for social security numbers, and it's going to look for custom keywords. So you actually have control over one of the three things with the keywords. We had one company that wanted to find driver's licenses for a particular state instead of keywords. So if you want to do that, you could. So use your imagination on what you want to find. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out and scan that nominated UNC path that you give us for your file share. So you get to have control over that. And typically we recommend that between 200 and 400 gigabytes. And we're going to go and scan all that, looking for credit card socials and whatever custom keywords you have. Here's what we're not doing. We are not storing the folder structure in the report. We're not storing the file name. We're not storing who last modified it. All we're doing is saying, does this file have a credit card? Yes or no. Same with the social, same with the keywords. We are capturing the extensions. We are capturing the creation, modification, and age date, because in this sensitive data assessment, not only are we looking for those three types of sensitive data, but we're also going to give you some ROT reports that you can see and get some insight into those. I just conducted one of these, and we finished it up this past week. And some of these statistics that we showed were very alarming to people, because you can see and go, oh, wow, I didn't realize we had data that old, or we're not accessing data that's old, what have you. So we're going to identify the sensitive data where it is. It's a very light footprint in your environment. Once again, you have a VM with a piece of software called a connector and one called a file agent. They're both Windows services. They would be installed in that VM, and then it reaches out and connects to your file share. And then non-intrusive, once again, we're not doing any storage of any personal information. I've been asked, hey, can this go out and actually show me the file names and the folder names where we found it and the last modifier? Yes, Discover can do that, but not in this assessment. This assessment is only to be able to go out and perform the task that it's set for. Next slide, please, Marcia. So what we're going to do now is, Marcia, if you would quit sharing, please, I'm going to go ahead and share. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the artifacts that we produce when we do the sensitive data assessment. So right now you should be seeing my screen. Marcia or Rick, could you confirm, please?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Awesome. So what you're seeing here is what I did is I ran a policy in the data governance module of Gimmal Discover. and it produced a report. I then exported that report to a CSV file, and I ingested it into the sensitive data Power BI template that we created, and it's going to show me a lot of very interesting statistics. So first off, on the left-hand side, what you're seeing under the file information, this is the total number of files that we searched. So over 172,000 files were scanned, and we have a breakdown of image versus text files, because for Windows file shares, Discover does have the ability to look for text inside of image files. Now, we are not converting those files. What we're doing is we're using OCR, but we're leaving the file format the same. So when we're done, that file's in the same format it was prior to us scanning it. But what we can do is scan the text that's available in that image file to be able to find the matches on these three types of data that the sensitive data assessment is looking for. And then we're going to give you the total size of all that data. So those 172,000 files, roughly 640 gigabytes. And then in this case, we found 17 different extensions out there. Now, more than likely, this is going to be in the hundreds or thousands. We come upon a lot of extensions that I have honestly no idea what they are. A lot of times there are date times on them. So this number is going to be quite larger than this. This is just my sample data. But one of the things we're going to do with ROT, which is redundant in R, is we're going to show you how many files are duplicated within the environment. So this could be anywhere from 1% to 50%, depending on how many times the same file is sitting out there. And I'll talk a little bit about that once we get down to the duplicates page. And then the sensitive information, just showing you overall how many files had sensitive data within them, and then each type. Now, keep in mind, with this, we will look for a credit card number in the file, and then we will look for the keyword, and then we will look for social. So we're not stopping once we find a match, because one file might have all three or a combination within it. So that is the pie charts for those. So these three pie charts representing your data. Now, if I go to created, now we're going to see the obsolete portion of ROT, the O, or outdated or obsolete within that acronym. So what we're showing down here, the 10 age ranges, how those files stack up within the age ranges, and then breaking down whether or not they're image or text and the total size of those. And then based upon each one of these age ranges, how many of the three different types of data we found within them with totals at the bottom. So this is a little telling. So I'm going to draw your attention right now to the 15 to 20 and the 20 plus, around 7,000 and 6,000. So we're going to see what that looks like compared to the modified. So now we just go to the modified date. And here we have, once again, it's the bar chart. And now we're just using a different date. Around the same kind of numbers, 7,000 and 5,000, roughly the same. Now if I go to access, suddenly we're looking at 433. So I was, if we were on a call right now, I would challenge somebody saying, what does that mean to you? I'm going to give you the answer. What that means is that, going back, we got a lot of files that were created and modified 15 to 20 years ago or more, but nobody's using them. So my estimation is those are obsolete files. We don't need those anymore. So this is where you can go out and using Gimmal Discover, not in the sensitive data assessment, because all we're doing with this is giving you these stats. But with Gimmal Discover in the data governance module, we have the ability to remediate that data. So we could go out and delete things based upon maybe the age or any other metadata or content available to be interrogated. So you can set up those decision points, just like we're doing with socials, credits, and the keywords. You can also use other metadata or content to make decisions on, is this something I need? So this is where the remediation portion of Gimmal Discover really comes into play because of having this option. Lastly, we're going to show you the extensions and the breakdowns on those. So you go see how we have the extensions. Maybe AVI files aren't used in your business. Then why do we have them? Maybe they're movies of the Christmas party or whatever they might be, some trivial data. So this is the T in ROT. So this will give you more insight on that. And then lastly, going to the duplicates. And you're going to see that we show you here all the duplicates. So in this case, 13,000 plus files are duplicates of each other. And you're going to notice down here at the bottom, how are we determining that? We're creating a 32-character hexadecimal number, and that is called a hash. And that hash is we're going to compare and say, are there two files with the same hash? If so, they're matches. Now, most likely, their modification date time is going to be the same. It doesn't have to be, because you could open and save a file without changing it. and the hash will remain. But most likely it's going to be the same date time, but we don't care where they are. We don't care what they're named. We're looking at the content only of the hash. So there's information about that. So overall, to summarize, we saw the summary information about the sensitive data. We saw all of the obsolete with the 3 age ranges. We saw the trivial with extensions, and then the redundant with the duplicates. So that is the end of the sensitive data assessment. Marshall, back to you, please. See if there's any questions.
Yeah, let me make sure I can share. Can you guys confirm, Jeff?
Yes, we're back on the sensitive data example report slide.
Terrific. Okay. So time for questions. I have not seen any questions posted yet, but
okay. That's fair. We can do those at the end.
Yeah, if you all have questions, reminder, you could please put those in the Q&A area and we'll be sure to get those answered for you. So with that said, Jeff, you're on a roll. We're going to keep
I am on a roll. Okay, so this one's going to take a little bit less time, I promise, because we've talked about this a little bit. The redundant, you're going to notice sometimes people refer to the O as obsolete, other times outdated. They're synonymous, of course. But let's go through and, yeah, go ahead and just get rid of the animation, Marcia. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So the different types of unstructured data, email. So I want to talk about that first because that is our #1 use case for Gimmal Discover. So what it does is it is policy enforcement of email. I have seen policies anywhere from anything older than 90 days in any folder in a mailbox gets deleted, and then up to whatever kind of federal regulation, 10 years, 20 years it might need to be. But using Gimmal Discover, you can go through and set what your policy should be, and then it becomes a set it and forget it methodology because it's going to run on a periodic schedule, maybe every Saturday, and it's going to go through and clean up data. So once again, that is our largest use case, and that's both Exchange and Gmail, as you see here. And then the instant messages, so if you get into Teams, then we can go through and look at those. We can look at OneDrive, as Marcia said, SharePoint. All the different types of unstructured data can be covered by Gimmal Discover. Next slide, please. Here's some startling numbers. So look at that. 80% of data will be unstructured by 2025. And then go to the last slide. It's going 50% every year. So once again, if you're one of the companies that aren't satisfied, well, you're not alone. I have talked to many companies that say we need to get our arms around this problem because it's just getting worse. So just be aware that, once again, this is the best time to do this. And does it look like a daunting project? Yes, it probably can be. It could take months for the processing to get everything under control. But if you wait, it's just going to take longer the next time. So definitely encourage you to do it sooner than later. Next slide, please, Marcia. So what is an unstructured data? I'm sure a lot of you already know this. So we have a lot of different types of data that can be in there. Obviously, we have all the sensitive data. We have the duplicates as well. But then you get down to things that are privileged, like acquisitions and divestments and anything legal or anything that's confidential or copyrighted, or like a recipe for a formula for some pharmaceutical company. Any of that type of information is probably going to be in your unstructured data. And it'd be a great idea to understand where it is and what it is. Next slide, please, Marcia. And I think we have some other ones there as well. Yeah, some other ones. So here we are, the sensitive, the personal identifiable. I included passport number on this one. Any business information, all the HIPAA regulations that are going on. I mean, if you're involved in the healthcare industry, this could be patient IDs. Once again, anything that can uniquely identify a person, that data is suspect, and you probably need to understand where it is and what it is. Next slide, please, Marcia. So here's another starting number. Rot can consume 25 to 75, and I would wager typically it's more than 25. It's usually around 50% of the data. So what does that mean? So obviously you're going to have business data that you want to keep, and we're not saying that all your data needs to be deleted or put on a retention policy enforcement. That's not the case. But you, at the same time, there's a lot of data sitting out there, And I do it as well. You store stuff on a file share and you never look at it again with great intentions that, hey, this will be out here for my usage, and I never use it. But that stuff accumulates, especially if it has any PII in it. So it's really important, once again, to be able to go and get an understanding of what type of data is out there and figure out exactly what your exposure is for that. Next slide. So we sort of covered these already with talking about the sensitive data. So the data leakage, once again, if a laptop is stolen, you've got a problem on hacking. I mean, obviously, we all know about that. I know of a few companies that have been ransomware. That's a terrible thing. And they took 3 to 6 months to get out from underneath that. So it was quite a process. Even myself, I was actually, my personal identifiable information, the IRS was hacked. And they did the lower part of the alphabet. And with my last name as it is, I was one of the ones included in that. So I've had to take steps personally to make sure that my IRS stuff is now protected due to somebody coming in and trying to steal that information. So we hear about hundreds of thousands of people having their PII being available to bad actors out there. We hear about those things way too often. And unfortunately, we're all going to fall. I hope you guys don't, but we're probably all going to be affected by that sometime or another. Next slide, please. Then the cost. So here's the thing. So when you talk about rot data, so I mean, I realize there's a lot of hard costs here. There's a soft cost in time. Time is, we a lot of times we just say, yeah, so go work on this and take however long it takes. But that's drawing that person away from something else it could be doing. In addition, if we have 10 terabytes of data and now it comes time for a lawsuit, it's going to be a lot faster to only search the 5 terabytes of data by getting rid of your rot. So anything with litigation typically has to be very timely. So it'd be highly advised to get rid and trim or prune this data down as much as you can. So when you do have to perform e-discovery, you can reduce the calendar time it takes to actually produce all that data. Next slide, please. Thank you, Marcia, for doing the animation. So here is all of the different things to consider. So what are you going to use? How are you going to decide what is rot? Do you want to use the metadata only? Do we also want to use content? Because obviously you can do that. But what I want to encourage you to think about is also, what are my exceptions? There's going to be data that is older than what your policy is going to be, but you still need to keep it longer. So that's where that classification I was talking about earlier comes into play. What I recommend doing is going out and applying the classification labels to your data first. That's probably going to be a small set of data. And then once you have that, now when you do the rot process, even if it's the analysis only, which this should be a measure 20 times, cut once kind of thing, because you don't want to delete until you're very, very high confidence. But what they will do is you can bypass those classified files and exclude them from the rot processing. So that's why I always recommend doing those first. If you can go out and have the data owners be able to help you identify that. Because if you're in IT, I defy you to tell me you're going to know what data needs to be kept and what doesn't. The data owners can be leveraged to help you with that. There's a labeling process I talked about. And then we get down to rot versus non-rot. And we have another product called Gimmal Records, which some of you might be aware of. And what that does is a formal dispositioning process for records. So having Gimmal Discover to be able to get rid of the rot and manage that, that then frees up Gimmal Records with the non-rot to be able to actually formally disposition a smaller set of data to deal with because you've already gotten rid of the rot. So it really benefits you in a multitude of ways in making sure that your rot is clean. Next slide, please. So one of the first things I do is say, let's go out and find your redundant files and determine the winner. And winner, loser sounds a little harsh, but what I'm talking about that is maybe you have 6 occurrences of the same file. What's your criteria for determining which one is going to be kept and which 5 are going to be deleted? And a lot of times it's the last modified date that determines that, but it might be its location. It might be the owner who last modified it. So keeping track of all that, but you can use Gimmal Discover to do all of that kind of analysis to be able to have that information available to you. Nominate a subset of your data, a subset of data that you believe you're going to find all of the sensitive data within. Once again, using these different types of metadata or content. as well as things you know you're going to actually want to get rid of. And then go through this and perfect this methodology. So you're going to go through and you're going to run a policy to analyze, and you're going to say, whoops, I forgot a keyword. I'm going to put that in. I'm going to run it again. You're going to do this iteratively until you feel highly confident. And then you can start going through applying the labels and then start remediating. And then, as it says there, lather, rinse, repeat. So start with something small that you feel confident you know what's in there. That way you feel confident in the results you're getting out of it, and then go through and start expanding the scope as you go. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to jump over. Marcia, if you would stop sharing so I can. Thank you. You're way ahead of me. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to do one more Power BI. And can you please confirm, somebody, that we have the Windows File Path Retention report up?
Yes,
Yeah,
got it,
it's
Jeff.
up to.
Thank you. Awesome. So we're going to see a lot of kind of the same kind of data here. What this is doing is saying, I went out and I want to analyze anything older than 3 years by the modification date of the file. And what this is showing me are the different files in the different buckets of age ranges, and also give me some idea of some various flags. Are they images? Are they protected? Are they system? What have you? And then break it down by extension as well. And once again, anything under processing are the ones that are greater than 3 years, whereas the path information is all data. So we analyzed 1.3 mil, but we only found 213,000 between 3 and 20 years old. So this shows us that. And then I go in and make some nice pretty charts. So we can see a pie chart by age range, some by type here. So obviously a lot of text files versus images, and then get an idea of our most prevalent extensions that we have out there. Then I took the opportunity in the statistics to say, well, for each one of these are actually users folders on your network drives. And I thought, what do we do is like, let's just go out and give me stats. So Barbara Wilson has 84 folders in her environment. These are not ones that are older than 3 years. These are giving you the full set of data, tells us how many files she has and what have you. So only 8,000 of her files were older than 3 years old. So it just gives us a breakdown of that. And then lastly, this is my favorite part of the Power BI. And what this does for you, these are called slicers, for those of you who have never used Power BI. And what it allows me to do is saying, you know what, I don't want to know that. I want to know anything between 7 and 10 years old that is a Word document. And now my numbers are going to represent my selections on the left-hand side. So you can really analyze your data, or you can select everything. You can analyze your data very nicely by using these slicers in this report. So all these things that I've done with Power BI are just simply exporting a report out of Gimmal Discover into a CSV file. I made up some Power BI templates to ingest those CSV files and then to report on them in a very visual way. So that's all I've done with this. It's not any magic. It's just giving you that data in a nice analytical, viewable way of showing it, as opposed to just looking at raw text. That concludes I will stop sharing, Marcia, my part of this presentation.
Okay, nice job, Jeff. Thank you. Can you confirm you see my screen again?
Yes, we can.
Terrific. Okay, well, let's move on. Questions again, Jeff. I'm sorry, we don't have any questions, but that's okay. You must have covered things really well. If people do have questions later, again, you can post those in the Q&A area of your Zoom bar. So moving on. So next up, we have Rick Wilson. Rick is going to be talking first about legal hold notifications.
Thanks, Marcia. And Jeff, nice job. Did a great overview of not only what Gimmal Discover can do, but how pretty you can make those reports in Power BI. Some nice analysis tools there. So let's switch gears for a moment, folks, and we're going to stay in the context of this sort of data security discussion, but we're going to approach it from a slightly different vector by talking about legal holds. And a couple of disclaimers before we go too deep. I'm not an attorney, so the information I provide to you today can't be construed as legal advice, but we've had a lot of interface with legal folks as we develop the software, and our clients have used it. So we're sharing that as part of the presentation today. And the information you're going to see is existing functionality inside Gimmal Discover. So this is not coming attractions. All of this is in the product today. We'll cover some things that involve legal terms, litigation terms. And during the course of that, I'll try to define those for those of you who don't have a legal bent in the audience and may not know what I'm talking about. Because of the nature of the subject, there's some jargon, some legal jargon involved. Probably the first thing to understand about litigation hold is there's two sides to this coin, if you will. The first side is often referred to as preservation. So when an event occurs, for example, you receive a subpoena that says your company's being involved in a litigation for whatever reason, you've got a duty to start to preserve information related to that investigation or that lawsuit or that litigation. That is often referred to as preservation. We're not going to directly address preservation today. What we're going to focus on is the flip side, if you will, of that coin, and that's legal hold notification to your custodians. Just as important as preservation, this involves informing people within your organization, and that's what I mean by custodians, our first legal term. The people in your organization have responsibility for a set of data. That could be somebody who owns, for example, a mailbox. It could be a department head that manages a group that uses a specific SharePoint library or folders. It could be somebody who's in charge of a file share on the network for their a group for accounting or what have you. Those would typically be custodians in this context. Legal hold notification is the process of advising those custodians that there's an event has taken place. And as a result of that event, they have a duty, in fact, they have a responsibility to preserve information that might be related to that event. If they don't adhere to that responsibility, it's referred to as spoliation. So that is, think of spoliation as the willful destruction of relevant data. This is what you read about in the newspaper where somebody ran to the file room and started shredding files because they knew something bad was about to happen. Interesting sidelight on spoliation. As an organization responsible for content, information in your environment, you have a duty to preserve content even if you believe there might be a litigation that's about to occur that's going to involve you. You can't get off the hook by saying, I wasn't told, or the suit hadn't been filed, or we hadn't been informed yet. Judges typically take a very dim view of that. So for example, if you read in the morning paper that your largest client is being investigated by the government for fraud, that you think that there might be financial shenanigans going on within your large client, it's probably advisable for you to start to preserve and protect the information that's relevant to that client in anticipation that that suit might occur. Again, check with your own legal counsel, but that's the information and feedback that we have received about preserving information. And as part of that, you may want to inform your custodians through a legal hold notice that there is something that could be about to occur. So legal hold in Gimmal Discover is not a very extensive process. If you look at legal hold solutions in the market, many of them are part of a much larger e-discovery tool. They involved deploying an e-discovery product, and the litigation hold is a small little checkbox feature that occurs as part of that deployment. So they are relatively expensive. They can take a long time to implement, and there's a serious investment required in order to do that as part of a major scale legal product that might be in the marketplace today. We took a slightly different approach. We were talking to customers who were doing this with spreadsheets and Outlook. So you may not have an e-discovery solution in place. Maybe you use outside counsel to provide that, but you want to be able to handle this notification process in-house. If those are the kinds of backgrounds that you're coming from or where your interest is, Gimmal Hold is tailor-made for you. It's very lightweight. It's easy to deploy. It gives you all the functionality you need without the complexity. And we focused on three key things as we built the product, these three silos that you see on the slide below. We wanted to make it defensible so that when you stand in front of a judge and he asks you if you informed your custodians, you can demonstrate that that occurred and you have all the information that you need to be able to say, we performed all the right steps to notify our custodians and advise them what was about to occur. Is it reliable? We built a cloud-based solution. Gimmal Discover in large part is a cloud-based solution. In some cases, it uses on-premise software components to connect to data silos like email and file shares for the kind of functionality Jeff showed. But for our base litigation hold, you don't even need to do that. You can run it all from the cloud. So you could literally subscribe to Gimmal Discover this morning and be using it for hold notifications in the afternoon. And we tried to keep it very streamlined so it was efficient and easy for you to use. And I'm going to show you a quick demo as we go along here to demonstrate that fact. So Marcia, if you could go advance to the next slide, please. With that in mind, there's 5 fairly straightforward steps involved in using Gimmal Discover to inform and advise your custodians about a litigation hold. That first step you see on the left is being able to initiate a matter. So a matter, think of a matter as a container or a folder, a way to organize the things that you're doing with regards to a particular lawsuit, litigation. In the legal world, they call that a matter. So for example, a client that you're doing work for may have different projects, and each one of those projects is termed a matter in the legal world. So we would create a matter inside of Gimmal Discover. We'll show you that as we get into the demo. Then you define the metadata for the hold. So this is all of the information that sort of provides the structure for the hold. When does it start? What's the name of the hold? What matter it is associated with, and so forth. Think of it as maybe the demographic information. One of the key things to think about when you're defining metadata is reminders, because part of this process, oftentimes these litigations go on for months, in some cases years. And in that situation, you want to make sure that you advise your custodians on a regular basis that hold is ongoing. And as part of that ongoing hold, they have a responsibility to continue preserving data. So you can automate that reminder process in Gimmal Discover. So you don't have to think about it. You don't have to remember to send an email every month or every quarter, go through your spreadsheet and figure out if you need to send one to Susie and Jeff and Marcia. It can happen automatically as you set up the hold itself. The third step in the process is defining the rest of the information relevant to the hold. What do we need to tell custodians when the hold closes? What do we need to tell the custodian when they acknowledge it, and so forth? And then we would associate custodians with the hold. That would be step number 4. So as I mentioned, the custodians are the folks within your organization who are responsible for owning and managing content. There's a couple of different ways inside of Gimmal Discover to add custodians to the product. Some of our customers who don't have a very large list of custodians to work with simply input those. So we've got an input form where they can add those custodians directly into Gimmal Discover, name, email address, and so forth. Probably more frequent or more common is being able to sync a list of those folks from an Active Directory or Microsoft Entra environment and pull it down into your Discover database. So different ways that we can obtain that custodian. But as we create the hold, we can associate the custodians who are responsible for it. That's not a static list, by the way, because holds often evolve during the course of a litigation. So you may have, for example, additional custodians who need to be added 3 months from now because the case has taken a turn and now we've gone down a different track and we're looking at different information, or opposing counsel's requested information from another party in your organization. So you have to add that custodian to your hold. So we have the flexibility to be able to do that as the hold progresses. And then that final step in the 5-step process is to actually administer your notification. So I'll show you this in the demo screen. There's an area inside Gimmal Discover where you can trigger the notification process. You can see if a custodian has acknowledged the receipt of their litigation hold. That's another important component to this. If you've included a questionnaire, maybe you want to solicit additional information from that custodian. You can do that by creating a questionnaire inside of Gimmal Discover and attaching it to the hold for your custodians to complete online. So we can track that as well. We can close the hold. All of that's done in this administration step process. Okay, Marcia, I think we can go to the next step here, and this is probably demo. So whenever you're ready, thank you. Okay, folks. So we're going to log into Gimmal Discover now and take a look at the hold information inside of Gimmal Discover. As this starts to process, a couple of things I wanted to mention to you. First of all, The legal hold area inside Gimmal Discover, you see legal hold up at the top here, is part of the e-discovery capability inside the product. So if you're a Gimmal Discover customer today, this icon for you may say e-discovery, and legal hold is a subset of that. For people who want to use just the litigation hold notification process inside Gimmal Discover, we can provision just that functionality for you when you start a subscription. And that's the view that you're going to see today. And you'll notice when this loads, especially if you're an existing customer, some of the functionality that you would see in your full e-discovery module is grayed out on the side. So for example, we don't have the ability to build a search or perform a collection of data. Those would be considered full e-discovery capabilities. As I mentioned, when we talked about that 5-step process, it begins with creating a matter. So matters allow you, as again, these are just placeholders, containers, a way to track and manage the information that you're putting into Gimmal Discover from the discovery point of view. And on this high-level page, you can see we've named the matter. It's assigned a number. If you have internally a tracking system, you can override this with your internal number. We assign one automatically. If not, there's an owner. This is going to be an important concept in just a minute. There's custodians. You can see we have both the ability to support individual people as custodians and groups. So you could have a group that you pull in, for example, from Active Directory who becomes part of your matter when you create it. The other thing that's associated with a matter when you create one is the ability to control who's allowed to access it, which is really important since Gimmal Discover is a multi-user tenant. You may have multiple people within your organization who have access to this console that we're looking at, and there may be certain matters that you don't want them to see. I see this a lot with clients who are working with outside counsel. So when they create a matter, if that matter is something they want to share with outside counsel, they'll add them as a user to the matter. If it isn't, if it's maybe an internal investigation, for example, they won't add the outside counsel, and that becomes invisible to outside counsel then when they log in. So that's what matters are all about, and we can add those very easily up at the top of the menu bar here. Once the matter's in place, then you can move on to creating the hold itself. Now, before we launch into actually how we build the hold, there are a couple of components of a hold that I wanted to show you. So if we go over here to where it says more, you'll notice there's the ability to build templates. So this would be the notification text that's going to be provided to the custodian when you send them notification. And you can create, think of it as boilerplate text for your hold. So if there's text that you repeat over and over again for different cases, you could put part of that as a notification template, and then you could supplement it when you create the hold. So it saves you some steps during that process. The second thing is a questionnaire. So I mentioned when we talked about this at the beginning, we can attach questionnaires to the custodian. And this brings up, think of it as sort of a survey monkey type capability where you can define questions and specify what kind of a question this is. Is it a multiple choice, a true, false, fill in the blank, is it required, and so forth. So you can build those questionnaires in advance. So that's sort of pre-work, if you will, that can be done as you create a notice. But let's take a look at a notice itself just so you can get an idea of how that is built. And this tracks very closely to the 5 steps that we laid out on the slide, right? So we're going to provide general information, give the hold a name, associate it with the matter. Down here, you see we've got 2 types of notifications. And if you select the box, then you get to specify a frequency for those. So the first one is, how often do we ping a custodian who has an acknowledged hold? So we do this via email. We send them a notification. In that notification, there's a link they click that provides formal acknowledgement that they've received the notice. And if they don't do that, we can send them a reminder every 7 days, 2 days, whatever the frequency is, that they have a pending notification that they need to acknowledge. So that's what the first reminder is. The second one is the important ongoing reminder. So if this custodian's part of a matter or a hold that's ongoing for the next 6, 8, 10 months, maybe we want to alert them or remind them every 30 days that that is continuing. Moving on to the second tab, then this is where we would provide sort of that baseline information. Again, think about the process that we're delivering this to our custodians via email. So we can specify the sender, who should it appear that this email came from when they receive it. Do you want to reply to address? Do you want to do a CC or BCC? Maybe you want to let outside counsel know that these notices went out, so you could BCC your outside counsel representative. Up here at the top is where those templates come in. So there's a drop down here to select templates, and they're reflected at the bottom here. So as I change templates, and we're going to pick one of our standard ones, you'll notice now the information relevant to that template has changed. And we've included the ability to do some formatting here, so you can put colors and bold text and italics and things like that in if you want to call attention to a specific part of the notification. This will actually be the text your custodian receives. And then finally, subject line for that email when they receive it, and the ability to attach files. So maybe you've got a standard, employee document, to sort of a employee manual segment, for example, that specifies what a user or an employee must do when they're put on litigation hold. You could attach that PDF file, for example, to the notification. Likewise, when the hold closes, what do we want to provide the custodian? There may be closing instructions. I mean, this is very simple. Notification that closes the matter, notification's closed, but you may have something more extensive that you want to provide to them in the way of guidance and information. Third tab is this acknowledgement tab, fourth tab, and this is the information that is sent to the custodian after they've acknowledged receipt. So just to confirm to them that, thank you, we received your acknowledgement and we're good to go for now. And then finally, here is where you could add the custodian. So this brings up a list of anybody who's part of the matter, and you can select the people that are relevant for the legal hold notification. You may, for example, have folks on the matter who are no longer employees. So obviously you're not going to provide notification to them because they're not part of your organization any longer. So that creates a hold notice. Now it's in the system, it's ready to go, and we can start to use that. And that can be done pretty simply by selecting your hold, going up here to the hold notifications icon. And this is maybe, think of it as a central management area for your legal holds. So here we're showing all the custodians that are on the hold. You can trigger notification right here by actually clicking the send notice button for one or more of your custodians. You can close the hold. You can also see when the notification was sent, if they were previously notified, when they may have acknowledged, and in fact, if they provided an answer to a questionnaire, that would also be a link to see that as well. So that's a quick peek at legal holds. One more thing I wanted to show you to kind of round this out. There's also, we call this a master custodian list. This becomes important if you have either a lot of custodians or perhaps a lot of matters, litigation that you're involved with. So the question oftentimes comes up, is a specific custodian, what are they attached to? So by going to the master custodian list here, we can look to see what that custodian is part of, whether they have specific matters or specific holds that they're attached to. All of those are hyperlinked off of this screen, and you can gain access to them very easily to see what that custodian's involved with. So that's a quick peek. Sometimes it's helpful to see exactly what it looks like inside the application. It brings it to life a little bit more. And Marcia, if you can return to the slide deck, we'll pause for a minute and see if there are any hold questions.
Yeah, I do not have any questions, Rick. So we're going to keep
Awesome.
marching forward here. And up next is going to be the preview.
Yeah, we're very excited about this. So if you can roll the slide, Marcia, I'll start to lay this out for everybody. So this is a feature that we're releasing in Gimmal Discover. General availability goes out next weekend, so it will be available soon. If you are an existing Gimmal Discover customer, you'll be able to take advantage of this. For those of you who aren't, this might be of interest to you. So what we're trying to do is make Gimmal Discover more compatible with Microsoft 365. We already can access content in 365, email, SharePoint, OneDrive, etc. But there was an area in 365 that we didn't really have visibility to in the product before, and that's called Microsoft Purview. So this is the data protection capability. Purview, actually Purview does a lot of things, but one of them is data protection inside of Microsoft 365. And as part of that 365 subscription, especially if you're an E5 user, I think you need to be able to take advantage of this. You can define sensitivity labels. So sensitivity labels, you could think of them as a stamp that gets attached to a piece of content. And you can categorize a piece of content as belonging to a category: personal, private, confidential, etc. So those are called sensitivity labels in 365. In my screenshot here, you can get kind of a quick view of what that looks like to your end users then when they're using one of the Microsoft Office tools. Up at the top of the ribbon bar, you can see this document, this Excel document that we're showing in the example, has been labeled as confidential. That becomes really important from a data protection point of view, because now you can tie inside 365, you can tie protection to a label. So you could do something like say, any document that's been classified as confidential can't be emailed outside the organization, and it becomes a way to help you control your information. Can you roll forward one more slide, please, Marcia? So is this something that might be of interest to you to take advantage of? Well, here's probably the main criteria. So you need to be a 365 Purview customer to be able to take advantage of this today. And where we really bring value to the process is when you need to apply those sensitivity labels to content that's outside of 365. Think about all of that information Jeff mentioned when he talked about file shares inside your organization. Maybe even information that's on your user workstations, your endpoints. Discover will allow you to pull those sensitivity labels from 365 and then define a set of criteria to examine your local content on your file shares and your endpoints and apply those Purview labels for you automatically. There's no easy way to do this in the confines of Microsoft 365 today. So we talked to a couple of customers who had gone through a really painful process to apply the MIP labels to their file share content. And that involved taking folders at a time from their file share, moving them to SharePoint, classifying them, applying the sensitivity tags inside SharePoint in 365, and then moving them back again to their file share location. So it was very time consuming, extremely painful. This will help you circumvent all of that. So we'll label it right in place, apply the sensitivity label. Your Microsoft controls can then be used to manage that information, or you can use features inside Gimmal Discover to interrogate an item and be able to interface with it as well. Copy it, move it, delete it, move it to SharePoint or OneDrive, for example. So as I mentioned, if you're a Gimmal Discover customer, this will be coming to the file agent for you soon, and you can look forward to seeing it. And we're very excited about the capability to work closer with Microsoft Purview. Move forward, Marcia. Just one quick way to sort of get a visibility on this. So I didn't want to do a full demo on it, but because it's got kind of limited functionality, you have to be using Microsoft sensitivity labels for it to really appeal to you, but you kind of see the screenshots down below where we can define access to a label on the left-hand side, and then the middle show you the labels that are available, and then set those labels, or maybe multiple labels. You can have more than one as a way to tag your content. Interesting sidelight to this, because Jeff gave you a really good overview of what we're doing with sensitive data assessment. This can tie into it nicely. So maybe once you've found that sensitive data, the next step begins, hey, let's label it with our Microsoft Purview labels, our sensitivity labels. So now we've got a better way to manage it and control it. Okay, Marcia, I think that's this slide.
Yeah,
Great.
I think that's a wrap. We have no questions. So you guys really covered yourself very well with all the information. Appreciate that. So really just to round out the event, that's all the key sessions. I just wanted to give everybody a heads up as to where Gimmal is going to be for second half of the year. A lot of different places. So if you happen to be traveling to conferences, please check us out, see if we'll be there. We'd love to say hello with our team on site. All these can be found at our Gimmal events site on our website as well. Other than that, thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this. Thanks, Rick and Jeff, for the great content. If you have any questions or want some more information on Gimmal Discover or any of the topics that we talked about, please feel free to drop me an email and we'll be happy to help you out. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.